The chlorine smell still clung to Marcus's clothes as he watched the police cruiser pull into his driveway, its red and blue lights painting his drought-stricken lawn in ominous colors. Behind the wheel sat Officer Rodriguez, her expression grim. As she stepped out, hand resting on her radio, just 20 minutes ago, his neighbor Helen had stood at his fence. Now, as Marcus watched the officer approach his front door, he realized Helen's or else had arrived faster than he'd ever imagined. And the police weren't here for the reason either of them expected. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked concrete of Marcus Chin's empty swimming pool, its brutal rays turning what had once been a source of joy into a monument to California's worst drought in decades. Marcus stood at the edge, sweat beading on his forehead as he surveyed the damage. The pool's once pristine blue tiles now showed water stains like a bathtub ring, marking where the water level had dropped week by week until he'd finally made the painful decision to drain it completely. Absolutely disgraceful. The voice cut through the morning air like a blade. At 62, Helen maintained the kind of aggressive elegance that came from years of HOA meetings and neighborhood watch committees. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her coral-colored lips were pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "Don't you mourning me, Marcus Chen?" She spat his name like it tasted bitter. "Look at this eyesore." Marcus glanced at Helen's own backyard, where her emerald lawn sprawled like a green oasis, sprinklers still misting despite the mandatory water restrictions. Her pool sparkled crystal blue in the morning light, clearly freshly filled and chemically balanced to perfection. "The water restrictions," Marcus began. "I've spoken to the city council. There are exceptions for maintaining property values and preventing public health hazards. That concrete crater you're calling a pool is both an eyesore and a breeding ground for mosquitoes." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "Helen, we're in the middle of the worst drought in 40 years. Pools are supposed to be maintained, not abandoned." Helen's voice cracked like a whip. "I've done my research, Marcus. The city ordinance clearly states that property owners are responsible for maintaining their pools in sanitary condition. Draining a pool completely violates multiple health codes." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through what looked like screenshots of city regulations. Section the 3rd of February 18 covers property maintenance standards, and Section 24.1. "I memorized the ones that matter," Helen snapped. "The ones that will get you fined, sanctioned, and if necessary, forced to comply through legal action." The morning breeze carried the scent of Helen's overwatered jasmine bushes, a sickly, sweet aroma that made Marcus's stomach turn. He'd moved to this neighborhood 3 years ago after his divorce, hoping for a fresh start. The house had been perfecta, modest ranch style, but Helen had made it clear from day one that she considered him an unwelcome intrusion into her carefully curated suburban paradise. "I understand your concerns, but I'm following the city's water restrictions. I can't just—" "You can and you will," Helen interrupted, her eyes blazing with self-righteous fury. "I've already filed a complaint with the city. Inspector Morrison will be here next week to assess the situation. But I'm giving you one last chance to do the right thing voluntarily." She stepped closer to the fence, her fingers wrapping around the chain link like prison bars. "You will refill that pool by tomorrow morning, or I will make your life a living. Hell, I have connections on the city council, connections in the HOA, and connections in the county health department. I can make sure every inspection, every permit, every request you ever make in this city gets buried in red tape." Marcus felt a chill despite the blazing sun. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm making you a promise," Helen said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more menacing than her shouting. "Fill the pool, Marcus. 24 hours. She turned and walked back toward her house, her heels clicking against the stone pathway like a countdown timer. Marcus watched her go, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The irony wasn't lost on him. Helen was demanding he waste thousands of gallons of water during a drought while her own yard looked like a golf course. His phone buzzed. A text from his daughter, Emma. "Can't wait to swim this weekend, Dad. Pool ready." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices. Emma was only 8, and she'd been so excited about their weekend plans. She didn't understand drought restrictions or neighborhood politics or the financial strain of maintaining a pool on a teacher's salary. She just wanted to swim with her dad. Another text, this one from his ex-wife Sarah, Emma's been talking about the pool all week. Please tell me you haven't drained it." Marcus looked back at the empty concrete basin, then at Helen's house, where he could see her silhouette in the window, watching him like a predator studying its prey. In the distance, he could hear the sound of automatic sprinklers running on Helen's property, a constant reminder of her hypocrisy. His phone rang. The caller ID showed his brother David's name. "Marcus, I just got off the phone with that inspector friend of mine," David said, his voice tense. "The one who works for the county health department. Apparently, she's filed complaints with the city, the county, and the HOA. She's claiming your empty pool is a public health hazard and a breeding ground for mosquitoes." Marcus sank into his patio chair, suddenly feeling exhausted. "My options? Not many," David admitted. "The inspector said they're required to investigate all complaints. If they find violations, the fines start at $500 and go up from there. And if you don't comply, they can place a lien." "On your property? This is insane," Marcus muttered. "I'm trying to conserve water during a drought, and I'm being punished for it." "I know, man, but Helen's not wrong about the regulations. The city's been slow to update them." Marcus watched a bird land on the edge of his empty pool, pecking at something in the cracked concrete. "So what do I do?" "Fill the pool," David said quietly, "not when Helen's got them in her pocket." After hanging up, Marcus sat in silence for a long moment. The heat was becoming unbearable, and he could feel sweat soaking through his shirt. He thought about Helen's ultimatum, about Emma's excitement, about the mounting pressure from every direction. Then he remembered something his father had told him years ago. Sometimes the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same thing. You have to decide which one you can live with. He could fill the pool, keep Helen quiet, make Emma happy, and avoid the legal complications. But as he reached for the hose, he stopped. The waste of it all made his stomach turn. Thousands of gallons of water used to spite him and feed her ego while the state burned with drought. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. California drought conditions worsen. Governor calls for stricter water conservation measures. Marcus stared at the screen, then at the empty pool, then at Helen's house. He wanted to be. As he stood there, wrestling with his decision, he had no idea that Helen was already dialing a number that would change everything, or that the empty pool behind him held a secret that would soon surface in the most unexpected way. The clock was ticking, and the game between neighbors was about to become something much more dangerous. Marcus was still standing in his garage, staring at the coiled garden hose, when he heard Helen's voice carrying across the fence. She was on her phone, pacing back and forth on her patio, her tone sharp and animated. He couldn't make out all the words, but he caught fragments: immediate health hazard, property values, and enforcement action. His stomach dropped. She wasn't waiting 24 hours. She was making calls right now. Marcus stepped closer to the fence, staying hidden behind his tool shed. Helen's voice became clearer as she moved closer to the property line. ... Yes, I understand you're busy. But this is exactly the kind of situation that turns into a lawsuit, Helen was saying. I have photographs, documentation of the violations, and witness statements from other neighbors. The pool has been empty for 3 weeks. 3 weeks? Do you understand what that means for mosquito breeding? Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Witness statements? What neighbors? The Johnsons on the other side barely spoke to anyone, and the Garcias across the street had always been friendly. No, I don't think you understand the urgency, Helen continued, her voice rising. I'm not just talking about a code violation. I'm talking about a public health emergency. Standing water in the deep end, cracked concrete creating perfect breeding. Conditions for disease vectors. This isn't just about my property values. This is about community safety. Standing water in the deep end. Marcus looked at his completely empty pool, bone dry except for a few leaves that had blown in. Helen was lying, boldly, blatantly lying to whoever was on the other end of that call, Inspector Morrison. Yes, I know he's scheduled for next week, but this can't wait. I need someone out here today. This afternoon, if possible. Helen paused. Listening. Emergency protocols. Yes, I believe this qualifies. The homeowner has been unresponsive to multiple requests for voluntary compliance. Unresponsive, Marcus had spoken to her exactly once about the pool, and that was 10 minutes ago. His hands clenched into fists as he listened to Helen fabricate. a narrative that painted him as a negligent neighbor endangering the community. Perfect. Yes, I'll be here all afternoon. An inspector, bring a citation book. This is going to require immediate enforcement action. Helen hung up and immediately dialed another number. Marcus crept closer, his heart pounding. City Council. Offices, yes. I need to speak to Councilman Bradley. This is Helen Blackwood. Yes, I'll hold. Marcus knew that name. Bradley was the councilman who'd been pushing for stricter enforcement of property maintenance codes. He'd been in the news recently for his tough love approach to neighborhood blight. Councilman Bradley, Helen Blackwood, I've been a supporter of your community improvement initiatives, and I have a situation that requires immediate attention. Her voice had shifted to a smoother, more political tone. I have a neighbor who's created a significant health hazard, an abandoned swimming pool that's become a breeding ground for mosquitoes and other pests. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the walls closing in. Helen wasn't just filing a complaint. She was orchestrating a campaign. Yes, I have photographs. I also have documentation of multiple attempts to resolve this voluntarily. The homeowner has been completely uncooperative. Helen's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Between you and me, Councilman, I think there might be more going on here. The property has been, let's say, declining since he moved in. I'm concerned about what other violations might be discovered upon closer inspection. Other violations? Marcus's mind raced. His property was well maintained. His lawn was brown because of the drought, but so was half the neighborhood. His house was in good repair. His garbage cans were properly stored. His car was registered and insured. What could Helen possibly be referring to? Excellent. Yes, I'll coordinate with Inspector Morrison. And Councilman, I really appreciate your commitment to keeping our neighborhood safe and beautiful. You have my vote in November. Helen hung up and immediately started dialing again. Marcus watched in horrified fascination as she worked through what was clearly a prepared list of contacts. Each call followed the same pattern. Establish her credibility, describe the emergency, escalate the urgency, and request immediate action. To the County Health Department, Vector Control Emergency. Standing water, disease prevention protocols. To the HOA President, Covenant violations. Property value impacts. Immediate intervention required. To someone she called Judge Patterson, Helen Blackwood. Yes, the case about the Martinez property. I have another situation that might interest you. Marcus felt his world spinning out of control. In the span of 30 minutes, Helen had transformed a simple disagreement about pool maintenance into what sounded like a multi-agency enforcement action. She was using connections he didn't know existed, referencing procedures he'd never heard of, and painting him as a public menace. His phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor across the street. Maria Garcia. Marcus, there's a city truck parked outside your house. Everything okay? Marcus looked through his garage window and saw a white pickup truck with City of Riverside code enforcement emblazoned on the side. A man in a uniform was taking photographs of his property from the street. Shit, Marcus muttered, then immediately felt guilty for swearing. His daughter Emma hated it when he used bad language. He walked to his front door and opened it cautiously. The code enforcement officer was a heavyset man in his 50s with a clipboard and a camera. He looked up as Marcus approached. Mr. Chen, I'm Inspector Morrison, City Code Enforcement. I need to discuss some violations that have been reported regarding your property. Inspector Morrison, Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. I wasn't expecting you until next week. Emergency complaint, Morrison said, not looking up from his clipboard. Multiple reports of health and safety violations. I need to inspect your backyard pool area. Marcus felt like he was in a nightmare, of course. But I should mention there's no health hazard. The pool is completely empty and clean. Morrison's eyebrows rose. Empty. The complaint specifically mentions standing water and mosquito breeding conditions. There's no standing water, Marcus said firmly. The pool has been drained for 3 weeks due to the drought restrictions. Morrison studied him for a moment, then made a note on his clipboard. Well, let's have a look. They walked around to the backyard, where Morrison immediately began taking photographs. He circled the empty pool, checking every corner, examining the drains, even looking at the pool equipment. Morrison said, making notes. Pool is definitely empty. Number 2. Standing water visible. Equipment appears to be in good condition. Relief flooded through Marcus. So there's no violation. Morrison continued writing. Well, there's still the matter of pool maintenance requirements. Even empty pools need to be maintained according to city standards. And there's the question of whether draining the pool completely violates health codes. But the drought restrictions, Marcus began. Our state guidelines, Morrison interrupted. City ordinances take precedence for health and safety issues. If a pool poses a public health risk, it has to be maintained regardless of water restrictions. Marcus felt his hope crumbling. How does an empty pool pose a public health risk? Cracked concrete can collect water, create breeding sites for mosquitoes. Exposed surfaces can harbor bacteria, and ... Morrison paused, looking uncomfortable. There's also the aesthetic standards to consider. Property maintenance requirements. You're going to fine me for having an empty pool during a drought. Morrison sighed. Look, Mr. Chen, I don't make the rules, I just enforce them. The complaint, it was filed, I have to investigate, and I have to determine if violations exist. Based on what I'm seeing, there are some technical violations of the maintenance codes. Technical violations. Section 12.47 requires pools to be maintained in sanitary condition. Section 18.2.3 requires property owners to maintain their property in a manner that doesn't negatively impact neighborhood aesthetics or property values. An empty pool could be considered a violation of both. Marcus felt like he was being gaslighted. So I'm required to waste thousands of gallons of water during a drought to avoid violating aesthetics codes. That's not my call to make, Morrison said. I just document what I find and issue citations accordingly. He tore off a sheet from his clipboard and handed it to Marcus. Notice of violation. You have 7 days to bring the property into compliance or face fines starting at $500. Marcus stared at the paper, feeling numb. What exactly do I need to do to be in compliance? Fill the pool and maintain it according to city standards, or properly winterize it according to approved procedures? What are the approved procedures for winterizing? Morrison consulted his notes. You'd need to contact a licensed pool professional, have them drain and seal the pool according to health department specifications, install proper covers and ventilation, and maintain monthly inspections by a certified technician. How much would that cost? Probably more than just filling it, Morrison admitted. Look, Mr. Chen, I can see you're trying to do the right thing with the drought and all. But the city has to balance conservation with public health and property standards. My advice? Fill the pool. It's the path of least resistance. After Morrison left, Marcus sat on his patio, staring at tea. Officer Rodriguez was younger than Marcus had expected, probably in her early 30s. With intelligent dark eyes and the kind of composed demeanor that suggested she'd seen enough domestic disputes to recognize the signs. She approached Marcus' front door with measured steps, her patrol car's engine still ticking as it cooled in the driveway. Mr. Chen, I'm Officer Rodriguez, Riverside PD. I need to speak with you about a complaint we've received. Marcus wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans, of course. What kind of complaint? May I come in? This is regarding child welfare concerns. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter, his mind racing. Through his front window, he could see Helen's silhouette in her living room, perfectly positioned. To observe everything happening at his house, Officer Rodriguez settled into his living room, pulling out a small notebook. The space suddenly felt cramped and shabby under her scrutiny. Marcus noticed her eyes taking in the details. The stack of his daughter's drawings on the coffee table, the small pink backpack by the stairs, the family photos on the mantel from better times. Mr. Chen, we received a call this morning expressing concerns about the living conditions here, specifically relating to the safety of a minor child who visits regularly. My daughter Emma, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. She's 8. She stays with me every other weekend. The caller indicated there may be health hazards on the property. Something about an abandoned swimming pool creating dangerous conditions. Marcus felt anger flare in his chest. Officer, my pool is empty because we're in a drought. It's completely dry and clean. There's no health hazard. I'd like to take a look, if that's all right. They walked through the house to the backyard. Marcus acutely aware of every detail through Rodriguez's eyes. Emma's water wings hung on, a hook by the sliding door. Her inflatable unicorn float was deflated and folded neatly in the corner. The pool furniture was arranged hopefully around the empty concrete basin, waiting for better times. Rodriguez walked around the pool's perimeter just as Inspector Morrison had done an hour earlier. "This is completely dry," she observed. "It has been for 3 weeks," Marcus said. "I drained it to conserve water during the drought restrictions." The complaint suggested there was standing water, mosquito breeding conditions. "There's no standing water," Marcus said firmly. "Officer, can I ask who made this complaint?" Rodriguez hesitated. "I can't give you specific names, but it was a neighbor who expressed genuine concern about child safety." "Helen Blackwood," Marcus said flatly. Rodriguez's expression didn't change, but Marcus caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. "Do you have ongoing issues with Ms. Blackwood?" She demanded I refill my pool this morning. When I explained about the drought restrictions, she threatened to make my life hell. She's been making phone calls all morning to various city departments. "Have you had any other interactions with her?" Marcus thought back over the past 3 years. "She's complained about my lawn being brown, about my car being parked on the street during Emma's visits, about my trash cans being visible from the street, but nothing like this." Rodriguez made notes, her expression thoughtful. "Mr. Chen, I need to ask some questions about Emma's visits. Is she scheduled to be here this weekend?" "Yes, Friday evening through Sunday." "Has she ever been injured on your property? Any accidents, close calls?" "Never," Marcus said immediately. "She's always supervised when she's here. We have pool, rules, even when it's filled. She's a good swimmer, but she never goes in alone." "What about the empty pool? Could she fall in?" Marcus looked at the concrete basin. It was 4 feet deep at the shallow end, 8 feet at the deep end. "I suppose it's possible, but Emma's not a toddler. She understands it's empty, and she's never unsupervised in the backyard." Rodriguez nodded, continuing to write. The complaint also mentioned concerns about the general condition of the property. "Are there any maintenance issues I should know about?" "No," Marcus said, feeling defensive. "I mean, the lawn is brown because of the drought, but the house is in good repair. I'm a teacher, officer. I take care of my responsibilities." "What grade do you teach?" "5th grade at Roosevelt Elementary. I've been there for 6 years." Rodriguez's demeanor softened slightly. "My nephew goes to Roosevelt. He's in 3rd grade. Ms. Patterson is his teacher." "I know Ms. Patterson. She's wonderful." They walked back through the house, Rodriguez's trained eyes cataloging everything. Emma's bedroom was immaculate, decorated with unicorn themes and swimming medals from the local pool. The kitchen was clean, the refrigerator stocked with healthy food and Emma's favorite snacks. The living room showed signs of a father preparing for his daughter's visit. A new puzzle spread out on the coffee table, a stack of library books about marine biology. "Mr. Chen, I have to ask, is there anything else going on that might have prompted this complaint? Any other disputes with neighbors? Any legal issues? Anything that might make someone want to cause trouble for you?" Marcus considered telling her about the inspector's visit, about Helen's coordinated campaign, about the CPS report David had mentioned. But something held him back. He didn't want to sound paranoid or vindictive. "Just the pool situation," he said finally. "Helen seems to think I'm destroying her property values." Rodriguez closed her notebook. "I don't see any evidence of unsafe conditions here. The house is clean, well-maintained, and clearly prepared for a child's visit. The pool, while empty, doesn't pose any immediate danger." Relief flooded through. "Marcus, so you'll file a report saying there's no problem?" "I'll file a report documenting what I observed," Rodriguez said carefully. "But Mr. Chen, I want to give you some advice. Sometimes these neighbor disputes can escalate quickly. If you're having ongoing issues with Ms. Blackwood, you might want to consider documenting everything. Keep records of interactions, complaints, any harassment. Multiple unfounded complaints to different agencies can constitute harassment. If someone is trying to abuse the system to cause you trouble, that's something we can address." After Rodriguez left, Marcus stood in his living room, feeling like he'd survived the first round of a boxing match. His phone immediately rang. It was David. "How did it go with the police?" "Better than expected," Marcus said. "Officer Rodriguez didn't see any problems. She even hinted that Helen might be harassing me. That's something, at least. But Marcus, I have more bad news. CPS is scheduling a home visit for tomorrow afternoon." Marcus's stomach dropped. Tomorrow, but Emma's coming tomorrow night. I know. They want to inspect the house before her visit. They're also going to want to interview you about the living conditions, your relationship with Emma, your ability to provide a safe environment. This is insane, Marcus said. My house is perfectly safe. Emma loves coming here. No, but you have to take this seriously. CPS investigations can affect your custody arrangement. If they find any concerns, they can recommend restrictions on Emma's visits. Marcus sank into his chair, feeling overwhelmed. What do I do? Document everything. Write down every interaction you've had with Helen, every complaint she's made, every phone call she's made today. Get copies of all the reports filed against you, and seriously consider filling that pool. The pool's not the real issue here, Marcus said. Take away the weapon, and she'll have to find something else to attack you with. After hanging up, Marcus walked back to his garage and picked up the garden hose again. His hands were shaking as he connected it to the spigot. The moral weight of wasting water during a drought pressed down on him like a physical burden. But the image of Emma's disappointed face, the possibility of losing his weekend visits with her, made the choice seem clear. He was about to turn. On the water, when his phone rang, the caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Chen, this is Janet Morrison from Child Protective Services. I'm calling to schedule a home visit regarding a report we've received about unsafe conditions affecting a minor child. Marcus's heart sank. Yes, I was told you might be calling. I can come by tomorrow afternoon around 2 o'clock. The visit will take about an hour. I'll need to inspect the property, review the living conditions, and discuss the care arrangements for Emma. Ms. Morrison, I want you to know that Emma is perfectly safe here. My house is clean, well-maintained, and child-proofed. There are no unsafe conditions. I'm sure you believe that, Mr. Chen, but we have to investigate all reports thoroughly. I'll see you tomorrow at 2. After she hung up, Marcus stood in his garage, staring at the garden hose. The weight of the day's events pressed down on him. In the span of 6 hours, Helen had transformed his quiet life into a bureaucratic nightmare. Code enforcement, police, CPS all, because he'd refused to fill his pool. He walked to his fence line and looked across at Helen's house. She was still visible in her living room window, and when she saw him looking, she raised her phone to her ear in a gesture that seemed almost mocking. Marcus made a decision. He walked back to his house, grabbed a notebook, and began writing down everything he could remember about the day's events. Every phone call Helen had made, every lie she'd told, every agency. Tom Bradley had been a county water inspector for 15 years, and he'd developed an instinct for spotting unusual patterns in water usage reports. The automated system flagged accounts that showed sudden spikes in consumption, especially during declared drought emergencies. What caught his attention this Thursday morning wasn't just the massive water usage at 1247 Maple Street Tit, was the timing. Marcus Chen's water meter had been recording minimal usage for 3 weeks, consistent with a household practicing serious conservation. Then, suddenly, yesterday afternoon, it had started spinning like a carnival ride. In 4 hours, the property had consumed over 15,000 gallons of water, enough to fill a medium-sized swimming pool. Tom cross-referenced the address with the drought violation database and found something interesting. The property had been flagged for investigation by multiple agencies in the past 24 hours, code enforcement, police, CPS all, for the same address. That wasn't a coincidence. He pulled up the satellite imagery of the property and studied the layout. There it was, a residential swimming pool that appeared to be empty in the most recent photos. He checked the date stamp 2 weeks ago. Now someone was filling it during the strictest drought restrictions in California history. Tom printed out the reports and drove to Maple Street. He parked across from Marcus's house and observed the scene. The pool was about half full, crystal clear water sparkling in the morning sun. A man in his 30s was standing beside it, looking miserable despite the beautiful sight. That had to be Marcus Chen. Tom had dealt with thousands of water violations over the years, and he'd learned to read people. This man didn't look like someone celebrating a refreshing swim. He looked like someone who'd been forced into a corner. Tom walked up the driveway and introduced himself. Mr. Chen, I'm Tom Bradley, County Water Inspector. I need to discuss your recent water usage. Marcus's face went pale. Inspector Bradley, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Mind if we talk about it? They stood beside the filling pool, the sound of rushing water providing an ironic soundtrack to their conversation. Tom pulled out his tablet and showed Marcus the usage graphs. Your consumption spiked yesterday afternoon. 15,000 gallons in 4 hours. That's more water than most families use in a month. I know, Marcus said quietly. I've been conserving for weeks. I drained the pool to follow the drought restrictions. But then, then what? Marcus looked across the fence at Helen's house. My neighbor filed complaints with every agency. She could think of code enforcement, police, CPS. She claimed my empty pool was a health hazard. I had to choose between wasting water and potentially losing custody of my daughter. Tom followed Marcus's gaze to Helen's property. Even from this distance, he could see the emerald lawn, the full swimming pool, the automatic sprinklers, running despite the 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. watering ban. That's your neighbor's property, Helen Blackwood. She's been watering that lawn every day since I moved here. Tom made notes on his tablet. Mr. Chen, I need to be honest with you. What you've done, here filling a pool during emergency drought restrictions, carries a fine of up to $5,000. It's a serious violation. Marcus nodded, looking defeated. I understand. I just ... I didn't know what else to do. Tell me about these complaints. Start from the beginning. Marcus walked Tom through the previous day's events. Helen's ultimatum, her coordinated phone campaign, the visits from Inspector Morrison and Officer Rodriguez, the CPS investigation. Tom listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. Do you have any documentation of these interactions? Some I wrote down what I could remember. Officer Rodriguez suggested I document everything. Smart officer. Mr. Chen, I'm going to need copies of all reports filed against you in the past 48 hours. I'm also going to need to interview your neighbor. Helen, why? Tom studied the usage graphs on his tablet. Because her water consumption, it tells an interesting story too. They walked across the street to Helen's house. Her property was a stark contrast to the drought-stressed neighborhood around it. The lawn was golf course green, the flower beds were lush with tropical plants, and the pool was filled to the brim with crystal-clear water. Helen answered the door, wearing a floral sundress and a self-satisfied smile. Can I help you, ma'am? I'm Tom Bradley, County Water Inspector. I need to discuss your water usage with you. The smile faltered slightly. My water usage? I don't understand. You've been using an average of 8,000 gallons per day for the past month. That's 4 times the recommended conservation level and twice the emergency restriction limit. Helen's composure cracked. I'm maintaining my property according to city standards. I have every right to keep my lawn and pool in good condition. Actually, ma'am, you don't. We're under Stage 4 emergency restrictions. All non-essential water use is prohibited. That includes lawn watering, pool filling, and decorative fountains. I haven't filled my pool, Helen said quickly. It's been at this level for months. Tom consulted his tablet. Your meter readings show daily spikes consistent with pool refilling. You're losing water to evaporation and adding it back every day. That's a violation. Helen's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. I pay my water bill. I pay my taxes. I have a right to maintain my property. Ma'am, I also need to ask you about the complaints you filed regarding your neighbor's property. What about them? You reported health hazards and standing water in an empty pool. You told multiple agencies that Mr. Chen was creating unsafe conditions. But according to my investigation, his pool was completely dry until yesterday afternoon. Helen's eyes darted between Tom and Marcus's house. I was concerned about potential problems. Empty pools can collect water, create breeding grounds. Ma'am, there's no evidence of any water collection in that pool. In fact, your neighbor had been following drought restrictions better than anyone else in this neighborhood, until yesterday, when he was forced to fill his pool because of your complaints. Forced. No one forced him to do anything. Tom showed Helen his tablet screen. Your water usage over the past month totals 240,000 gallons. Mr. Chen's usage for the same period, including yesterday's pool filling, is 45,000 gallons. You've used more than 5 times as much water as your neighbor while filing complaints about his conservation efforts. Helen's face had gone from red to white. I don't see what this has to do with anything. It has to do with harassment. Ma'am, it has to do with filing false reports with multiple agencies. And it has to do with the fact that you've been violating drought restrictions while trying to force your neighbor to violate them too. You can't prove any of this. Tom pulled out his phone and showed Helen a recording app. Actually, I can. This conversation is being recorded for regulatory purposes. Would you like to revise any of your statements? Helen looked trapped. I want to speak to my lawyer. That's your right, ma'am. But I need to inform you that you're being cited for multiple violations of emergency water restrictions. The fines total $12,000. You also have 24 hours to reduce your water usage to compliance levels or face additional penalties, $12,000. Daily pool refilling, automated sprinkler systems during band hours, non-essential lawn watering, and exceeding emergency usage limits. The violations have been ongoing for weeks. Helen's composure completely cracked. This is about him, isn't it? She pointed at Marcus. He's turned you against me because I tried to make him maintain his property. Ma'am, this is about water. Conservation. During a state emergency, Mr. Chen's pool was empty until yesterday. Your lawn has been green all summer. The math speaks for itself. After leaving Helen's house, Tom walked back to Marcus's property. The pool was now 2/3 full, the water level rising steadily. Mr. Chen, I'm going to do something unusual here. I'm going to give you a choice. Marcus looked up from watching the water fill his pool. What kind of choice? Option 1. I cite you for the drought violation. $5,000 fine, mandatory water usage restrictions, possible criminal charges for wasting water during an emergency. Marcus's heart sank. And option 2, you drain this pool immediately and return to conservation practices. In exchange, I'll document that you were coerced into violating restrictions by false complaints and harassment. No fines, no penalties. You can do that, I can, when the circumstances warrant it. Your neighbor has been violating restrictions for months while filing false reports about your conservation efforts. That's not just a water violation, it's abuse of the regulatory system. Marcus looked at his half-filled pool, thinking about Emma's visit that evening. If I drain it, what happens when the other agencies come back? What about the CPS investigation? I'll be filing a report with all relevant agencies documenting the harassment campaign and false complaints. I'll also be recommending that Ms. Blackwood be investigated for filing false reports. And Emma, my daughter, your house is safe, your conservation efforts are exemplary, and you were victimized by a neighbor's harassment. Any agency that looks at the facts will see that Marcus walked to the pool equipment and turned off the water. Drain it. Are you sure your daughter might be disappointed? Marcus looked at Helen's house, where she was visible pacing frantically. In her living room, probably on the phone with lawyers.